Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. My name is Kyle, and our goal is to help others build faith and restore hope by sharing our love of truth through a kingdom mindset. I am joined tonight by my two amazing brothers right over here. I got Mr. Jonathan, say hello. And
Howdy.
right down below, I've got Pastor Joe. Say hello, Joe.
All right, shalom.
All right, tonight we are going to be covering chapter 2 in the book of Jubilees. So without further ado, let's get cracking.
All right, the book of Jubilees, chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "And the messenger of the presence spoke to Moshe according to the word of the Lord, saying," write the complete history of the creation, how in 6 days the Lord God finished all his work and all that he had created, and kept Sabbath on the seventh day, and hallowed it for all ages, and appointed it as a sign for all of his work. Verse 2 says, "For on the first day he created the heavens which are above, and the earth, and the waters, and all the spirits which serve before him, the messengers of the presence, and the messengers of sanctification, and the messengers of the spirit of fire, and the messengers of the spirit of the winds, and the messengers of the spirit of the clouds, and of darkness, and of snow, and of hail, and of hoarfrost, and of the messenger of the voices, and of the thunder, and of the lightning, and the messengers of the spirits of cold, and of heat, and of winter, and of spring, and of autumn, and of summer, and of all the spirits of his creatures which are in the heavens and on the earth. He created the abyss as in the darkness, evening and night, and the light, dawn and day, which he has prepared in knowledge of his heart."
Awesome. Hey, Joe, right there. Let's go ahead and pause for a second. I want to
right.
bring up in verse 1. I think this is one of the most important pieces that I saw in verse 1. It says, he created and kept the Sabbath, kept Sabbath on the seventh day. So the Father is keeping Sabbath, right? That's one point. And the second point to that one is, and hallowed it for all ages. He made this a holy, set apart day for all ages, not just until Yeshua comes and is his death, burial, and resurrection, for all ages, right? So this is an ongoing thing, and appointed it as a sign for all his works. That's a big, big deal. Before we go on to 2, did y'all have anything for verse 1?
Yeah, I kind of when you mentioned the appointed as a sign, it reminded me of that same language of the rainbow with Noah and the flood and that whole time. You know, he said, "Hey, this is a sign for all people for all times." It's almost like a covenant. It's a way that we can have a guarantee of what this is and why. So it's not just to be treated as any random day, just like how a rainbow is not there just because it's something pretty in the sky. I'd say, "Hey guys, I know it's been raining a lot. I'm not going to kill you with water. I promise." And so same thing with the Sabbath. He's saying, "Hey, this is a sign. This isn't just willy-nilly. This isn't just the end of the week. This is appointed as a sign." So that's something for us to stop and take a look at and take account for. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would back that up by saying that it is a covenant. It is a promise. It is something that, again, as we were discussing, Yahweh started from the very beginning. Before there was Pesach, before there was any other feast day, before there was anything else, he establishes this covenant with his creation. That on the seventh day, and this is what I say a lot when I'm at Divine, when I'm praying, I say, "Abba, thank you for the gift of the Sabbath. Thank you because it's a day that Abba, our dad, says, I'm going to be there no matter what." And I believe that, and let me say this, God's with us every day, no matter
Right.
what. But these are special appointed times, Moedim, appointed times, where Abba says, on this day in particular, every week, it's going to be in remembrance of what I've done, what I've created. And to me, it's just a special time to be around fellow believers and to spend that time praising Abba, reading his word, and it's supposed to be an enjoyable event, a feast, as you will. We talked about this in our men's group not too long ago, that on the Sabbath is a feast you're supposed to eat on the Sabbath, you know. And so there was a discussion about whether we should fast or not. To each his own. You that's your walk. You do your thing. But he does say it's a feast unto Jehovah, and so it should be a joyous occasion, not a somber day, not a whatever. But anyway, again, I agree with you guys. It was from the beginning, just like Kyle was saying, and it's going to be there. Guess what, guys? at the end. It's never been done away with. It is a perpetual 7 days for all eternity. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Yep.
And verse 2 I had, it says, it talks about on the first day he created the heavens, which are above the earth, and the waters, and all the spirits which served before him. And then it goes through the list, and it points out the fact that there are spirits for each and every one of these different things, right? So it's not like the Father's up there controlling everything all the time. He's appointed spirits. He's appointed these messengers or angelic beings, however you want to phrase that, to rule over these certain things and make sure that they go and do what they're supposed to do when the Father says do it, right? So I thought that was pretty cool, but it definitely points out that the spirits were created on that day. So in the beginning, right there in the beginning, the Father is creating all these things. So it's the first part of creation. He's putting in place the workers, if you will, to handle the creation that he's built. So thought that was really cool. Y'all have anything on verse 2?
I thought it was just really neat that, nowhere else have I ever read that God is associating these things with the messengers. You know what I'm saying? Like we look at things
Right.
in natural, we look at the frost, the cold, all these different things that are listed here, and it follows it up with the majority of these by saying, and the messengers. So it's like the messengers were given, that's your task. This is the things that you are over. And I think that's amazing that we get a little bit more glimpse behind God's creation and how this whole thing kind of comes together and it works. Because we think, oh, it just works. No, Abba has something in place for everything. Just like later on, we will read in other apocryphal books that there were watchers, and those watchers who left their first estate. And you're going, what were they watching? Well, they were watching over us. That's what their assignment was. And so, unfortunately, 200 of them decided, hey, we're going to leave this estate. We're going to leave the appointed place that we were supposed to be at, and we're going to step out in a place we're not supposed to be at. Yep. And so all these things that we see that Abba has a specific order in mind and task in mind. So that's amazing.
Well, before we go any further, I do want to remind everybody, if you're getting something out of this, please sure to click that subscribe button, click that like button, and ring that notification bell, and that'll make sure you get to see our pretty faces pop up in your timeline and see us each and every week. So we appreciate you coming by, and if you get something out of this, definitely do that. All right, so let's move on to verse 3.
In verse 3, it says, and we immediately saw his works and praised him and lauded before him on account of all his works, for he created 7 great works on the first day, and on the second day he created the expanse in the midst of the waters, and the waters were divided on that day. Half of them went up above, and half of them went down below the expanse in the midst over the face of the whole earth. And it was the only work God created on the second day. Interesting. And on the third day, he commanded the waters to pass from off the face of the whole earth into one place, and the dry land to appear. And I kind of want to pause on that with myself for a minute. So we've heard the term of Pangea before, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if, they can go back and they can look over and see all the land masses and see that at one point there's a good probability that all of these were connected in one place. And so we just read here that it says the water was, let me go back. It says, on the third day commanded the waters to pass from off the face of the whole earth into one place, and the dry land appeared. So maybe that's kind of a hint that everything was one at one point, and that water was moved away to one place, that everything was, and I'm referring, of course, back to the pre-flood era, before everything busted loose and got really crazy. So you guys got anything on that one?
Yeah, well, I want to be careful about I know what you're saying, and I know you're not following the whole theory behind Pangea, because that's a very evolutionary type idea.
Right.
But that concept that you're talking about, I think is we see plenty of evidence for something at least similar to that idea. So I don't follow the whole continents drifting apart theory. What we do see, though, when we explore our ocean floors, we see these fault lines, right? And these fault lines are divides for the great abysses. These fault lines is where the abysses opened up. These fault lines are the it's like they're underwater rivers, if you will. If you look at a fault line on a map, if you look at the way that they go around all the continents and whatnot, it appears to be underwater rivers. That's what it looks like. And so I believe these are the great depths. These are the locations where those great depths burst open during the time of the flood. So you had water coming down from the sky, and you had waters coming from these great depths bursting open, and it create that separation of land where they would have all been connected at one time. So I don't follow the whole Pangea drift situation. I mean, what I see evidence of is those abysses opening up. So, and with all the underwater cities that are found and that sort of stuff, it fully supports a flood, and it fully supports the idea that there was a lot more land that was usable back in history sometime, right? So
there's a lot of shaking and baking going on when that's the, and I know we're not even there in the book of Jubilees yet, but I've always, like, at some point though with this, with Noah, I was like, man, I don't think people quite, you got to really wrap your brain around this, that when it busted loose, man.
Yes.
Like this wasn't like, oh, it rained really hard.
Right.
It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, yeah. Man, it was talking about the like you're saying, the geysers of the deep. You know, we got water going up, you had water going down. Matter of fact, I could imagine, unless God was just completely just keeping the all 8 people from hearing what was going on. Can you imagine the sounds that they were hearing at that time when everything was truly just busting loose? So anyway,
it's the idea, to give a rough idea, and we don't need to stay on the subject too long,
right?
But the idea is, think of the entire fault line of the entire Earth all moving at one time. So you have the most massive earthquake that there has ever been all over the entire Earth simultaneously, with every volcano ever popping off at its most explosive points. At the same time, the largest tsunamis all over the Earth. All of this is going on at the same time, and it's raining. You know what I'm saying? So, like, there was a lot going on.
Yep. I was in verse 5, so I'll read that one again one more time. It says, and on the third day commanded the waters to pass from off the face of the whole earth into one place, and the dry land to appear. Verse 6, and it says, and the waters did so as he commanded them, and they retired from off the face of the earth into one place outside of this expanse, and the dry land appeared. And on that day he created for them all the seas according to their separate gathering places, and all the rivers, and all the gatherings of the waters, and the mountains, and all on all the earth, and all the lakes, and on all the dew of the earth, and the seed which is sown, and all sprouting things, and all fruit-bearing trees, and trees of the wood, and the garden of Eden, and all the plants for their kind. These 4 great works God created on the third day.
Yeah, what I find interesting on that whole portion there is just talking about that the land appeared, like the dry land appeared. So it's almost like, hey, it's not there, and now it's here. So, you can definitely see that's God doing some God stuff. This is nothing that we could recreate, or nothing we could try and, do something similar and by our own means. And then when it talks about the seeds and all the trees and whatnot, so sometimes I think we think that God just kind of spoke and then everything was just there perfect. But then he's like, no, some of it was seeds that were sprouting. Some of these were trees. Some of these were, different gardens and stuff. So it's like he created things in every stage, almost prepared as if it's always been in cycle, because you can't have a whole earth with nothing but seeds. You got to have some trees to cover the seeds and some seeds to grow in the ground. So you almost need the entire picture to happen, but all simultaneously. So he created, 100 years worth of history in one day, and, mature trees and new trees. And just the idea of a lot of that stuff, like sometimes I forget to even think about the depth of it, other than, oh, he just created everything and it was just there.
Yeah,
There
no
was
big
so
deal.
much, yeah, there's so much thought and so much ingenuity, like even in our own brains. Like we would never assume, or even we can't make a tree, right? Even if we planted a bunch of seeds, we'd have to sit there and wait like a bunch of, people watching paint dry. You're just, well, I mean, it'll be a tree eventually.
Yeah.
Where God's like, no, we need some real trees, to help out, and we need
Well,
some baby trees to replace them.
yeah, Jonathan, that's what we would call the original Miracle Grow.
So this,
All right, let's go to verse 8 here. It says, "And on the fourth day he created the sun and the moon and the stars and set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on all the earth and to rule over the day and the night and divide the light from the darkness. And God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for the Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for the Sabbaths of years and for jubilees and for all seasons of the years."
so Joe, in verse 9 it says, "And God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for Sabbaths of years and for jubilees and for all seasons of the years." So there's
Yep.
a big argument as to whether a day begin, forget about when a day begins for a moment, but when we are supposed to honor a Sabbath, or when we are supposed to honor certain things, and there's a lot of discussion that goes on as to whether it's a lunar Sabbath or a lunar something, right?
Right.
And this is and there's ways you can kind of look into the regular 66 books in the Bible, and you can make an argument for either way. And that's one of the things that's so amazing about this book, is it gives you much greater depth and information, and a lot of times will just give you plain text that says this is it. And that's what I love about it. So this is that's a big deal, right? So the sun is to be the great sign for days and Sabbaths and months and years and all that stuff. So I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, well, I mean, real quick, when we go back to if you're keeping a lunar calendar, that if you're following the moon cycles, and of course, you know that I believe it goes into Jubilees later, talks about this, that you lose days. So every 3 years, that's why on the not the I wasn't going to say the Gregorian, the Hillel calendar.
Yeah.
That they have to add in about every 3 years, have to add an extra month in just to compensate for losing those days. And so it makes you start to rethink some things when you go back and you start reading the text again. And you're like, even in the 66 books, if you're reading it, you can kind of pretty much come to the same conclusion that it's better to follow the sun when counting the days. As a matter of fact, in the book of Jubilees, where it points out that was going into the Sabbath, and we all know the Sabbath happens what? Every 7 days. It is a perpetual Sabbath unto the Lord, period.
Yep.
Nothing changes. There's because and it's not to speak negatively of anybody else who follows something different at all. Everybody has to walk their own walk, but there are those within our walk who will do, and I think it is a lunar Sabbath type thing, but their Sabbath days will fall on multiple days throughout the month. Like it might be 8 days later, or it might fall in 7 days. It could be on a Sunday, it could be on a Monday. And I think the text clearly speaks against that and doing that. That Abba, once he set this thing into perpetual motion from the very beginning, didn't say, hey, not to take away from that Sabbath and not to add to that Sabbath. That this is my day that I've set, and I've an appointed day that is perpetual, and again, it is forever.
Yeah, and the fun thing I like here is the something that we've heard probably many times, and stuff that as children we try to deal with a little bit, is what's up with light? Where do we get it? Where did it come from? What are we talking about? So here on the fourth day, so days later, is when he finally creates the sun, the moon, and the stars. So prior to this, there is light, but it's not the sun, it's not the moon, not the stars. So we get a little bit of a definition here of what is light and where does light originate from. Well, it's not from our solar system or anything that like that. That's where we see light. Right. That's where light comes from for us. But there was light prior to that. And so we know that, God is light. And it says that many times in scripture. And then all the way up until and through Revelation says there will be no need for a sun or a moon because God is light. So we
That's
kind of
right.
have that story of God being light all the way from, first page of the Bible, first page Jubilees.
Literally from the beginning to the end. We get
Exactly.
this.
You see what I was doing there. So
Yeah.
yep. Aleph and Tav and Alpha and
All right.
Omega.
All right, verse 10, it says, and it divides the light from the darkness and from prosperity, that all things may prosper which shoot and grow on the earth. These three kinds he made on the fourth day, and on the fifth day he created great sea monsters in the depths of the waters, for these were the first things of the flesh that were created by his hands, the fish and everything that moves in the waters, and everything that flies, the birds and all their kind. And the sun rose above them to prosper them, and above everything that was on the earth, and everything that shoots out of the earth, and all fruit bearing trees, and all flesh. These three kinds he created on the fifth day. In verse 13 it says, and on the sixth day he created all the animals on the earth, and all cattle, and everything that moves on the earth, and after all of this he created man. And a man and a woman he created them, and gave them dominion over all that is on the earth, and all in the seas, and over everything that flies, and over the beasts, and over the cattle, and over everything that moves on the earth, and over the whole earth, and over all this he gave him dominion. And these
All right,
four
hey,
kinds he
let's
created
pause
on
right
the
there.
sixth day. Yep, I was just finishing it out.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My verse has got it separated it differently. I
Yep,
apologize.
that's all right.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Go into verse 10 and verse 12 in mine. In verse 10 it says, and it divided the light from the darkness, referring to the sun. It divided light from the darkness for prosperity. And then down in verse 12, at least in mine, it says, and the sun rose above them to prosper them. Right. So uh, going back to last week where we were talking about the land flowing with milk and honey, I referred to that as being an agricultural type society that was referring to a land of plenty and being very prosperous and that sort of thing. And this is pointing right back to that. So that there's another layer showing you that that's what that's all about. So I wanted to point that out. Y'all have anything in this before we move forward?
Yeah. So kind of in that same vein of what you're saying, the sun is so integral in the things that happen on the earth, right? So for fish, you think, oh, they're in the water. Well, the sun has nothing to do with them. Well, they're still breathing oxygen just through their gills. And where do they get this oxygen is through the water. So you have kelp, you've got algae, all these things that produce oxygen in the water. And then at the surface of the water, which is why we have waves and all this other stuff, is you have oxygen exchange. So you have the plants helping with the process that need the sun. You've got the ocean, even though the fish are under the water, they still need the sun. So whenever I read prosper, it's almost like without the sun, you don't live. There's no
Right.
heat, so you freeze to death. There's no light, so there's no air. And there's no light, so you can't see. So literally anything that you would need to be prosperous on the earth is null and void without the sun. So I think it's kind of interesting that it did use that word. And we can see even in our scientific minds that the purpose is
I know, right?
clear.
So in a pagan mindset, it can make sense if they don't know the Father. I can see how it would make sense where they are looking for a God of some kind and how they could go to the Son as being their main God, because so much of their life benefits from the sun, and so much would be lacking or non-existent without the sun. But one thing that I find really, really cool is like we even with modern science, we can tell the sun is great. It produces, it gives us something when we're in the sunlight. It provides for us D3, right? Which is very, very good for you. However, it is not a sole provider because your body cannot absorb vitamin D without vitamin K2. You can take all the vitamin D you want. You can get all the sun you want, but without the vitamin K2, your body cannot process it and use it properly. And that comes from, well, plants and, that sort of thing. So you have to have all these things. There is no one great ruling element out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are all created things. And I think that's amazing that the Father made it that way. So you can't look to something and say, this provides me everything I need. He provides everything we need. I just thought that was really
Amen.
cool.
14.
Amen. All right. So what I would love to know is, what were these creatures that God created? It says that he created the sea monsters, as we put it that way. It says that he created the sea monsters in the depths of the waters, for these were the first things of, and here's the interesting part, it says these are the first things of flesh.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to always think about man, Adam and Hava, that we just read about in the verse after this. Yeah, there you go.
I'd be
Yeah.
willing to bet they probably had teeth like this.
Yeah. And here's the deal, though. It says these are the first things of flesh, and those things you just showed me, that tells me that those things ate flesh. They weren't playing,
Well, maybe. Now they
Maybe.
were fish, so they probably ate fish. However, we don't have. There's a lot of people that believe that there were no carnivores before the fall of man, right? Um, and there's a lot of. We can look at a lot of skeletons of animals, right? And we can. For example, I've seen people use the argument. They show a picture of a skull, and it's this animal with these massive, huge,
Right.
huge teeth that they just look ferocious, right? And you come to find out it's an animal that's still alive today, and it's absolutely a plant eater. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
what'd you say?
Like the panda.
Like the panda, right? It looks like, if you look at a panda skull, it looks ferocious, and they've got these super sharp teeth, and they eat, bamboo and whatever,
Oh, yeah.
right? So
That's because they're lazy. That's
right.
all.
I'm not
You're
chasing you.
I'm not chasing. I'll just eat another sugar cane or whatever, and just sit here and just look at you.
So yeah, I mean, they could have eaten other animals in the sea, maybe not. But
why
those,
would you think God? Why would you think God would give them those type of teeth if they weren't tearing into? I mean, I guess it could be good for eating their spinach too, under the kelp under the water. But
well, think about it like this, and this is for anybody that's dealing with any health issues. I'd tell them to seriously take a look at the plant life in the ocean, because there's a lot of vitamins and minerals that are very, very good for you. So if you're dealing with health issues, definitely, I'm not a doctor, but
he just plays one on television. That's all.
Right. How you doing?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know, right? I might have to cut that out.
No.
So,
leave it in.
So sea kelp and sea moss
Mhm.
have a high vitamin, high mineral, high nutrition content that's
Yeah.
very, very beneficial for you. So there are certain animals that never stop moving. Sharks are one of those animals. If a shark stops moving, it can die very quickly. It has to have water passing through all the time, right? So my thought is, a shark's not an animal that's going to swim up to something and nibble here and nibble there. No, a shark is going to very aggressively grab what it can as it's kind of going through an area, and it's going to rip and tear. I know I'm getting a little animated here, but I like sharks, man.
Hey, folks! We're starting Shark Week early, so forget about the Discovery Channel. We got Kyle.
There you go. So I mean, they needed those sharp teeth for the sake of being able to tear through plants really quickly to be able to digest them as they're swimming through. And another thing is, if that were the case, you would probably see more toothless sharks, right? Because passing through something, aggressively attacking like that, you're going to have teeth fall out if that's the way you're eating. Well, guess what? Sharks are designed with rows of teeth that kind of act like a conveyor belt, and they grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until they eventually fall out of the mouth. And they're constantly, throughout their entire life, are reproducing new rows of teeth forever. Until they die, they are constantly producing new rows of teeth all the time. So looks like an awesome creation where God really thought that process out. So I'd say, yeah, there's a high possibility that sharks were vegetarians at one point.
Wow, that would be some trippy knowledge to have, man. I tell you. All right, guys, you ready for? See, we were in verse 15, I believe. Yep.
Yep.
All right, here we go. It says, and there were altogether 22 kinds in verse 16. That was a short one, wasn't it? Verse 15 is like really short. It's almost like, and Jesus wept. There you go. And so in verse 16 it says, and he finished all his work on the sixth day, and all in the heavens and all in the earth, and in the seas and in the abyss, and in the light and in the darkness and in everything. Verse 17 says, and he gave us a great sign. This is the awesome part. The Sabbath day, that we should work 6 days, but keep Sabbath on the seventh day from all work.
Before he said it was a sign, a pointed sign. You're like, okay, kind of a big deal. Well, here it's saying it's a great sign. So now he's distinguished it even more from anything else that he's distinguished prior. Pretty much like if you're reading a book, it's the bold, italics, and highlighted. He said, this right here, focus, keep your attention on, don't mess this up. I'm even going to make a big, strong pause in everything that I'm doing in creation. I'm busy. I'm making animals. I'm making plants and water and all kind of stuff. But here, I'm going to pause you guys for a second and say, here's the Sabbath day. And don't forget about it. It's going to be a great sign. Not just a sign, but a great sign. And the thing that, what is the one thing that it says here? It says, but keep the Sabbath on the seventh day from all work. So it's telling you, hey, here's a great sign, and here's how you live it out. Here's how you walk it out. And he's saying, he himself rested to give us an example, right? So we have an example of what God did during creation, and then we get Yeshua later to see an example of what to do while we're living on earth. So, you work both of those together and you're saying, hey, we should have a pretty good example of what to do. We literally have God as our example, and then we have Yeshua who walked on the earth as our example. So I just love those two, to watch Yeshua walk out the exact same things that are written here. It's just really real fun and interesting to see what God actually meant when he said rest or don't work. He didn't say sit at home on your couch with your feet up being lazy all day or sleep all day long. He just says don't work. And you see Yeshua walking it out, and he's, healing somebody here. He's preaching to somebody there. He's having dinner, enjoying life and enjoying creation. So
what's really cool about what we just read also is the fact that it's mentioned twice within the middle of this chapter that we're going through, that it's mentioned twice about the Sabbath. So to me, the Father putting this in there twice, he's I think he's given us a hint here of how like Jonathan was saying, the importance of the Sabbath. And by the way, I'm going to repeat it again within here, because he knows how we are as human beings, and that we need repeated cycles of thought in our brains. So I thought that was really cool that the Father puts it in here twice about the Sabbath to give us another reminder about it.
Well, I think the shortest verse out of this whole thing so far, in my book, it's verse 15. It says, and these four kinds he created on the sixth day, and there were altogether 22 kinds. I find that to be really cool. We have all this speculation about how did Noah fit all the animals on the ark, right? And we think in our modern mentality about species and subspecies and variations within kinds and all that kind of good stuff, right? So basically, there's only a certain amount of genes that a particular animal is going to have, right? A canine, you can see every characteristic that a Chihuahua has available in that of a wolf, right? They're both canines, right? So you can see all those variations.
I like the comparison, though. You're going from one spectrum to the other, from a Chihuahua to a
absolutely. So when you look at the story, of the flood of Noah, right? How many of the unclean animals? Everybody thinks there was two animals, 2 by 2, right?
2 by 2, man.
One male and one female of every kind of animal. That's not what the Bible tells us.
Don't lose one on the way, because that's it. It's done.
Right. So what the scriptures tell us is that there were what, 2 of each, male and female, right? For the unclean. So that means for the unclean animals, like let's say a dog or a camel, there was 4 of those. And for the clean, there was male and female 7, which means there was 14 of those. So there was 14 of the clean animals, and there was 4 of the unclean animals for each species. Well, I'm calling it species. This is calling it kinds, right?
Mhm.
So with that much diversity in the gene pool, you could make every kind of canine that you could ever think of from 4.
Mhm.
You don't even need 4. All you need is 2, a male and a female, because the genetic makeup is there to be able to produce all of that. But
Right.
with 4, you have enough diversity to do any kind of mixing and whatever that you need to create the different types of breeds that we see today that makes up
Right.
all the different types of dogs. Same thing goes for horses, right? You have 4 different kinds of those that are able to interbreed. You can create all kind of stuff, right? So my point is this: there didn't, even though yes, there were, it wasn't just 2 of every single, there wasn't 2 of every single kind of snake that has ever existed. There were 4 snakes, period. 4
Mhm.
snakes.
Yeah.
Right? And from those 4 snakes, you can get all the other ones, because all the information is there genetically to create the other ones, as long as it's put together properly. And I'm sure the father had a little something to do with how they made it afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that's really, really cool that it tells us that there were 22 kinds. There was plenty of room on the ark for that. So, guys, we love you. We will see you on the next one for part 2 of chapter 2, studying Jubilees. Good night. God bless.